I don't think it's a stretch to say that every single person has dealt with anxiety in one form or another at one point in their lives. But if you've had a relationship with a narcissist, you might be dealing with some next level anxiety. In today's video, I want to talk about why that is and share 10 signs that you're dealing with anxiety and what you can do about it. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Common Ego community. My name is Christina, and on this channel we talk about emotional abuse, spirituality, and self-development. Today we're talking about anxiety, which is a topic that is important to virtually everyone in this community. Now, I also want to let you know that this video is sponsored by BetterHelp, which is an online platform that can connect you with a qualified therapist who will provide you with online therapy. Now, one of the things that I really like about BetterHelp is that they do ask you questions before connecting you with a therapist in an attempt to connect you with a therapist who's actually qualified to help you. And this is super important when we're talking about narcissistic abuse, because as some of you in this community already know, even a well-intentioned therapist who doesn't understand narcissism, emotional abuse, narcissistic abuse can do more harm than good. And if you do decide to check out BetterHelp, I suggest using the link in the description, betterhelp.com/common ego. That will get you 10% off on your first month. So why is anxiety such an issue for people in this community? Well, to answer that question, we can highlight one of the manipulation tactics that narcissists often use, and that is gaslighting. Gaslighting is one of their favorite tools, and gaslighting is an attempt to override somebody's reality. And through gaslighting, the abuser, the manipulator, will get you to question your own reality, your own thoughts. And just imagine, if you haven't been through this, just imagine how difficult it would be to go through life if you do not trust yourself. It's really one of the worst things that you can do to someone. So if you're going through life and you're constantly second guessing yourself, that can lead to a lot of anxiety. If you feel like you're not qualified to make decisions on your own, decision making is going to prompt a whole lot of anxiety. Now, there are different types of anxiety, but for this video, we're just going to focus on general anxiety disorder and general anxiety that you may feel. General anxiety disorder is characterized by feeling anxious most days, so more often than not, over a period of 6 months. And this anxiety is impacting your life in negative ways. And of course, you can deal with anxiety or anxiousness without having general anxiety disorder. So maybe it hasn't been 6 months, or maybe you feel like you have it under control and it's not negatively impacting your life. So now I want to cover the 10 signs that you may be dealing with anxiety in your life. And the first sign may seem a little obvious, but it is over worrying. So if you have something coming up, you just kind of maybe even overthink a little bit, which is another sign that we'll get to. But you go through all of the possible scenarios, what could go wrong, and you worry about those things. And especially if you've just recently gotten out of a relationship with a narcissist, this may be pronounced. You may notice this as a difference from the way you used to be. The second sign is that you just have this overwhelming feeling like you have lost control, like you don't have control of the important things in your life, and that leads to anxiety and worry. Another sign that you're dealing with anxiety is that you have a constant feeling of being on edge, and this is kind of a natural result of worrying that everything's going to go wrong and feeling like you have no control. So this naturally would put you on edge. Another sign that you may be dealing with anxiety is that you're having trouble sleeping. And this often manifests as trouble getting to sleep, because when you lay down, when you rest your head on the pillow, your thoughts just go crazy. You just start thinking about all the things you have to worry about, and that anxiety keeps you awake. It doesn't matter if you were exhausted all day, if you were barely keeping your eyes open all day. When your head hits that pillow, your mind just starts racing. So So the fifth sign that you're dealing with anxiety is that it may be manifesting in physical ways. So you may be feeling fatigue, possibly because you're not sleeping well. You may also have symptoms like muscle tension from all of that worry and stress. It manifests in your body. And you may similarly be experiencing headaches. So the sixth sign is something that we touched on already, overthinking or rumination. And this is so incredibly common after a relationship with a narcissist. And it's also common if you have grown up with narcissistic parents. And it kind of feels like a way of life. But it can definitely lead to anxiety, and it can worsen anxiety because the thoughts that you have usually when you're overthinking are not productive. And if you really break them down, they're probably not doing anything for your overall mental or emotional health or well-being. In fact, they're probably detracting from it. The more you think about something, the worse it gets. And you could end up overthinking conversations that you've had, conversations that you want to have, or conversations that you're worried about having. And it feels in a way like this is productive. This one can be a little bit tricky. It feels like you're being productive because you're going over what you said or what you will say or what you would say in a scenario, and you feel like you're prepping yourself for the inevitable conversations. But when you start keeping track of how all this overthinking is making you feel in the moment, you may notice some patterns, and it may be taking away from your happiness and your well-being in all of those moments that you were overthinking this thing. And if you're struggling with overthinking and rumination, I have a couple of worksheets that might help you out, and I'm going to be sharing those soon through our newsletter. So if you'd like to get those worksheets, be sure you're signed up for the weekly newsletter. So the seventh sign that you're dealing with anxiety is racing thoughts. Have you ever felt like your mind is like a runaway train and your thoughts are just racing, and usually it's not in a good direction? Usually this goes hand in hand with overthinking and rumination. You start thinking one thing and it leads to another thing, and it leads to another thing, and it just builds up momentum, kind of like a snowball as it picks up snow. And then by the time you're done, this thing is rolling so fast down the hill that you can't even catch it. Yes, I've been there. So the eighth sign that you're dealing with anxiety is difficulty concentrating. And this could be for a variety of reasons. It could be because you're not sleeping well, so you don't quite have the focus that you would when you are sleeping well. It could also be because you're anxious about things. You're worried about events that will come up. Maybe you're worried about bumping into this person that you've cut out of your life. But regardless of the reason, you're having trouble focusing. Another sign that you're dealing with anxiety is that you just feel this overwhelming sense of dread, like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, like something is always kind of looming. And the final sign that I have for you today that you might be dealing with anxiety is that you're experiencing changes in your appetite. Maybe you're eating a lot more than you used to, or maybe you're eating a lot less, but it's a noticeable change. So if you identified with all or most of the signs on this list, what do you do? Unfortunately, anxiety isn't really something that you can just will away. You can't ignore it until it passes, because anxiety doesn't tend to pass on its own unless it is anxiety related to a specific event. So if it's related to an event and that event passes, then hopefully the anxiety will go with it. But if you're feeling anxiety because you've had prolonged exposure to emotional abuse, that is not something that I would suggest ignoring. So I have some tips to help you deal with that anxiety. And yes, therapy is one of them. Now, I mentioned that today's video is sponsored by BetterHelp. And BetterHelp is a service that I do recommend. However, it's not the only source of therapy out there. If you have a therapist that you trust, or if someone else has recommended a good therapist to you that you want to try, if you want to go another route, the important part is that you get help for your anxiety, especially if it's interfering with your ability to live your life. If you've been dealing with this for 6 months or more, and you're finding that you're having trouble getting by because of it, there's no reason really to continue struggling. This anxiety is absolutely not your fault, and you can do something about it. Now, if you're experiencing anxiety to a lesser degree and you feel like you don't need or want therapy, there are other things that you can do to manage that anxiety. Now, I'm just going to mention 2 of them here today because I feel like these are extremely important and they're kind of like the low-hanging fruit. These are things that you can start doing right now to help manage your anxiety, and you can do them whether or not you decide to go to therapy. So the first one is to adopt a healthy lifestyle. Now, I am not a nutritionist and I am not a dietitian. However, I am someone who has done a ton of research on the impact of diet on our overall health, and that includes mental health. So this is something that you can research on your own, and I'm going to provide a couple of links in the description below for you to check out, maybe to help you get started. But there are certain nutrients that can, especially if you're deficient in them, have an impact on your mood. And similarly, exercise can also have an impact on your mood. So regardless of what you do, there are so many different lifestyle, healthy living plans out there. Try to stick to something that really feels healthy for you. And avoid all of those things that are not healthy for you, that we know are not healthy. And the other tip I have for you is something that I've mentioned before, and I've also mentioned that I struggle to do it consistently. That is still true. But I definitely do see the benefits when I do consistently stick to it. And there are a lot of studies to support it as well. This tip is to meditate. I know I've talked to a lot of people about this. Meditation isn't necessarily for everyone. However, if you can swing it, studies have shown that it can have a positive impact on your anxiety levels. So I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, go ahead and like and share, and if you are subscribed, I will see you next week.